We say that there should be a DVLA type website, a go-to place for families who go through this difficult experience of separation, where they get clear information about what the law says, they get clear information about what their children need, they get clear signposting into the resources that are available to support families, to de-escalate problems, and equally to fast track anybody who is at risk of abuse into the services they need to help them. So we say there should be early triaging and a clear website that is accessible early on. But the problem is, who is responsible for that? MOJ? No. Department for Education? No. Health? No. We need to face the reality that we live in a very different society today from the society that existed last century, 100 years ago, which is when family law really was embedded in our cultural understanding of the context for families who separate. Back then, a family tended to be two heterosexual people with Christian values, with a number of children, and any relationship breakdown was deemed to be the fault of one person. Thankfully, we live in a far more enlightened society now. We have all kinds of blended and diverse families of different faiths and structures and values. And we have a far deeper understanding of the nature of relationships, the complexity, and we have abandoned notions of fault. It used to be the case that children were to be seen and not heard, and we now have a lot of research and some wonderful papers, most recently the Voice of the Child report, emphasizing the need to give children a voice when decisions are being made which affect them. We need to listen to our children. We have vast changes in the science of understanding the well-being of children and their mental health development and how they are impacted by family separation. And I'll say a few words about that in a moment. So it was a very, very different society. Now, what I want to say to parliamentarians is that the work you have done in the last century has been brilliant. We have the Children Act. I think it was innovative and a world leader of its day. I understand that people from other jurisdictions around the world came here to learn about the Children Act. It was a brilliant piece of legislation, followed up by other good legislation, the Children and Families Act. We have civil partnerships. We now have no fault divorce. These all reflect the shifts in societal attitudes, and we have laws which are suited to the modern family. But this is where it all falls apart. New law is no good unless there is an implementation plan. We need policy and funding. We need public awareness of new law. So it permeates into our cultural awareness. That never happened with the Children Act. And here we are 30 years on, and we still, every week, there's a newspaper headline somewhere about a custody battle, about parental rights, about contact disputes. None of this reflects the brilliant laws that we have, which are centered not on rights and battles and custody, they're centered on parental responsibility, and most importantly, child welfare. And so who in Parliament takes responsibility for child welfare under our law when parents live apart? One might think it would be health or education. There is a Minister for Children who sits in the Department for Education. But in a recent exchange that Mike brilliantly had with her private secretary, it was confirmed that child welfare of all parents who separate sits in the Ministry of Justice under the remit of Lord Bellamy. This is the case even though most children whose parents live apart don't go anywhere near the family court. And the MOJ has no engagement with anything what they call upstream of the filing of a court application. I have to say we are fully excited and behind all the moves in the MOJ to look afresh at other means of resolving issues and the encouragement to consider mediation with the mediation voucher scheme and MIAMS. But of course, that only comes to people at the point that they're thinking of applying to court. There's nothing to catch families at that point of separation, when relationships are collapsing and there's a hurly-burly of emotions and mess and children are vulnerable. There's nothing. We say that there should be a DVLA type website, a go-to place for families who go through this difficult experience of separation, where they get clear information about what the law says, they get clear information about what their children need, they get clear signposting into the resources that are available to support families, to de-escalate problems, and equally to fast track anybody who is at risk of abuse into the services they need to help them. So we say there should be early triaging and a clear website that is accessible early on. But the problem is, who is responsible for that? MOJ? No. Department for Education? No. Health? No. The Department for Work and Pensions have done good work with the Reducing Parental Conflict programme, some really, really good work, but none of it is tailored specifically to the needs of families who separate. Some of their families are together, some of them are separated. It's all aimed at a particular income bracket, because ultimately it's to enhance the work that they're doing for child maintenance collection. So it's not a universal offer to meet the welfare needs of children whose parents live apart. It's a complete nonsense that this falls into a political void. And I want to share very briefly some research done by Professor Gordon Harold. He's a professor at Cambridge University, and he very kindly and helpfully condensed his report into 6 bullet points. And I'll put the link for this in the chat if anybody wants it after, but I know that many of you are familiar with it already. This is a simple summary of the evidence as regards parental conflict and family separation. And I'm going to skim down to the third one. High levels of conflict between parents are shown to have many poor outcomes for children: anxiety, depression, academic failure, substance abuse, conduct problems, criminality, peer problems, and adversely affected brain development. Conflict can even be passed on to the next generation, and these can stretch into adulthood. But moving down, conversely, actions designed to reduce the conflict are associated with positive long-term outcomes, clear improvements in mental health, behaviour, school outcomes, and long-term relationships. And this final point, I think, is incredibly important for all parliamentarians, because the benefits are not just for individuals, but for the whole of society. There are cost savings from the education system to health, social care, civil and criminal justice system, and positive future employment outcomes. It's an absolute no-brainer for the whole of society that the particular needs of families in these vulnerable times of separation, they need resources, they need policy, they need funding. We can't just abandon families to the nothingness, except the beckoning door of the family court in the distance once things have escalated and people have gone through misery. So I would say, what's going to happen about this? We have gone round banging on the door of various departments, and there's a lot of nodding. But interestingly, it is incredibly hard, as we've heard from Mike at the beginning of this meeting, to engage any parliamentary interest in this subject. The thing that seems to attract people is the problems of the family court, and the too many people come into family court, and we need family court reform. This is all framed as a problem for the court, rather than a massive, massive safeguarding health risk for the many hundreds of thousands, even millions of children in our society, and the knock-on effects through the rest of their lives. So this whole thing needs to be seen through a different lens. And I am sick to death of people talking about problems of family court reform when the elephant in the room is the vulnerability of children who are left with no support, no resources, and their parents are left flailing around with nothing after separation. So that's what I have to say. And I think I should finish at that point. Thank you.